G'day everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. The first video of the new year on the 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿 YouTube channel, and if you are a regular viewer, you do know I like to kick off the new year with this video, going over every AFL club and having a chat about what their New Year's resolution is for 2024. Now for each AFL club, I like to go over a team-based resolution, so that could be something like push towards a final spot, get out of the bottom four, make a grand final, something like that. But in addition to that, in this year's edition, I do want to add in also a play-based resolution. So that could be singling out a particular player from a club and saying they've got to have a big year and be a big impact for their side. Or it could be from more of a positional department sort of perspective of things, maybe singling out a team's backline and saying they really need to improve their structure, or maybe for a particular team's midfield to really get their midfield mix right. So I thought I'd add in this extra part into the video today, just so, you know, gives a bit of extra things to talk about for each AFL club. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you do go on to enjoy today's video, and let's get straight into it. We kick things off in alphabetical order, as always, with the Adelaide Crows, and for their team-based resolution, it's got to be to make the top 8. A pretty obvious one, but it just has to be stated. They've been in a rebuild mode since that 2017 grand final. This has got to be the year they make the push, because they were very unlucky last year not to make it. They lacked a bit of polish and they weren't so great away from home, but these are areas they can really improve on, because where they've been very, very good the past few seasons is that they've built a really strong foundation thanks to Darren Burgess of just being a really fit and a really accountable side. They were a very good pressure side last year, so they should build off that next year. They have a very good home record. If they can continue to build off that and be very good away from home, I think the Crows a good chance for the top 8. And now moving on to a play-based resolution, I like to single someone out like a Riley Thilthorpe or Darcy Fogarty to really have a good year next year with Taylor Walker aging. That's definitely a valid one. But I look at their defence and I still question, is it good enough to push the Crows towards a good spot next year? Because it's a little bit young and a little bit inexperienced. Because you have a look at Tom Doedee departing the club to Brisbane. Nick Murray was quite good last year, but he's off the back of an ACL injury now. Jordan Butts was injured last year too. They were playing Mark Keane and James Borlase for a chunk of the second half of last year. So I think for Matty Nicks, just to get that defensive structure right, heading into next year, or heading into this year now, is definitely important. And what can they offer? Max Michelani, he was very good in his first year. What can he do in his second year? So that's the questions I think for Adelaide. But if they can get their defensive structure right and playing some good footy, I think that's going to be the most important factor if Adelaide want to improve next year. Next team up we have is the Brisbane Lions, and for their New Year's resolution, I have them to bounce back and make their grand final again. They're a very professional side, they're a very mature side, they have a lot of plays in their prime. Why can't they go back and bounce back and just have another solid year of football? What really impressed me last year is they just built off a pretty good 2022 and made it even better. They didn't lose a game at home last year, and they really improved their defensive profile. And that leads me on to their play-based resolution, is just to improve that defensive profile. When you look at the Lions as a whole, probably defensively is, I guess, their biggest weakness. You have the likes of Harris Andrews, who moved into that new third tall defensive role. He was really awesome, helped out by Jack Payne and Ryan Lester. They had some great games. Darcy Gardner was quite decent as well. Kitty Coleman, can he really boss it next year? I think he's going to be key to really just patrol that half-back line for the Lions in 2024 if they do want to improve. But yeah, just as a whole for the Lions, I think, let's be honest, we all expect them to bounce back and really push towards that grand final. So it's another obvious resolution, but with the, now sort of aging but definitely experienced and highly talented Brisbane Lions side, it's got to be pushing towards another grand final spot. Moving on now to the Carlton Blues. If I was to ask Carlton fans what would their New Year's resolutions be, it would be to win a prelim final, make a grand final, win the flag. Yes, of course, those are all obvious and great resolutions, but I think we've got to take a step back with Carlton. And when I look at them as a whole, I just think for their goal for 2024 is just to display some high quality, consistent football for a full season, because I think with the team they have, if they're able to produce that, the win should come and a chance for top 4 should come. But it's just the most important thing for Carlton, because it was unsustainable with how they went at it last year. A middle patch was terrible, then they just turned things around, and then let's be honest, they did overachieve sort of to get to that prelim final. They've just got to really own it next year. Similar to maybe Collingwood, just have a really consistent year of footy, dominate the competition, because I think with the list they are certainly capable of doing that with a very good spine. Now for a play-based resolution, again, if I was to ask the question to Carlton fans, it would certainly be around this man of Sam Walsh. He hasn't had a full pre-season since 2021, and now for 2024 he's finally able to have a full pre-season by the looks of it. So does that mean he gets back to his best? Hopefully he is able to do so, because he is certainly one of the most hyped up individuals at the moment in pre-season. So for a play-based resolution, it definitely has to be around Sam Walsh for him to maybe have a career best year heading into 2024. Next team up, the Collingwood Football Club, the premiers of 2023, and for a New Year's resolution, it is hard to go past really something like going back-to-back. Why can't they do it? Very impressive side to watch last year, very well-balanced team, and just a mentally sharp side under a great coach. So yeah, for them just to continue to assert their dominance, make another top 4 spot, and have a crack at silverware is really hard to go past when looking at their team as a whole for 2024. And for a play-based perspective, as a New Year's resolution, well, they were probably one of their more older sides in the competition. I think they were the fourth oldest side, fourth oldest team in 2023. So I think starting to transition a bit of the youth into the senior side is an area where Collingwood could benefit off in 2024. Scott Pendlebury, side bottom, Jeremy Howe, a few of those players are starting to get on it a little bit now. So, I mean, a hyped up player definitely is someone like a Finlay Macrae. Will he get game time? Ed Allen as well. He had some good games in the twos last year. Jacob Ryan had a game, I'm pretty sure, last year. So yeah, starting to get a few more games in those types. I heard that Oscar Steen as well is looking like a good prospect. He put on a bit of muscle. And another one like Charlie Dean. So yeah, that's just where I look at Collingwood really from a play-based perspective. Start to get a bit more exposure into those younger players and make the transition and get a bit more exposure into them in the firsts. Now for the Essendon Bombers, for a team-based resolution, I just have a pretty straightforward one when looking at the Bombers. It's just to make a push towards finals. They made the top 8 in 2021. They had a really good crack last year. They were in the hunt, I'm pretty sure, after round 17. Why can't they make the full push heading into 2024? Yes, people do overrate and overhype their off-season. It happens with a team like Essendon, but I'm definitely bullish on them. I guess the negative is they probably don't have enough A-grade talent. That's what could hurt them. But if they're able to scratch the surface of a few of those exciting young players, if they can have breakout seasons, and if players can play their roles, I think they're a great chance. If Ben Mackay can really hold down his position and Ridley have a full consistent year, if Jake Stringer can get back to his best, if Todd Goldstein can produce a really good output this year and heavily develop the players of like Brian and Sam Draper, if Langford can have another great year too, if Merritt and Parrish and Elijah Sardis really have a breakout year, there's a lot to like about Essendon, and I think they're a good chance to push towards the finals. And for a play-based resolution for the Bombers, it's just to really improve that backline and improve that defensive profile. It was a letdown in the second half of their season. They lost that edge of accountability, and they were quite poor in transition. So I think, again, Ben Mackay, he's a big one. If he's able to play that true lockdown role, and if Ridley's able to have a full season and make a huge impact, I think that's going to be really important. They did lose 𝐓𝐿 𝐻𝐿𝐼, so will someone like, a Lewis Hayes or a Zach Reed, they do rate quite well. Are they able to push up into the first? Who knows? If Redmond's able to have a good consistent year, I think just that back line as a collective group's really got to improve if the Dons really want to heavily improve next year and have a chance to make finals. Moving on now to Fremantle for a team-based resolution. It's just to shock the competition with the young crop they have, and especially more consistent football. Fremantle, they're a bit of an unknown side, I think, for 2024. Their young crop excites me, and I think that can potentially be a sneaky chance to make the 8. Very optimistic thinking there, but I think in general, just more consistent footy is really what they got to display. Try to build a bit of a fortress as well. At home, they were able to do that in 2022. That dropped off a bit last year, but especially consistency. 1 week, they looked good defensively, and they looked exciting when moving the footy. Then the next week, they were terrible going inside 50, and they leaked goals at the back. So yeah, just they had a bit of an identity crisis last year, so that's definitely got to fix heading into this year. And for a player-based resolution, I like to just look straight at 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼 and say, this is the guy to build our team around. he's going to have a big year and kick over 50 goals. I'm big on this guy. He kicked over 40 goals this season. Why can't he go bang in 2024 and make a huge impact for Fremantle? So yeah, that's what I have for the Dockers. Now we move on to the Geelong Cats, and let's be honest, right off the bat, I think the most obvious way to preview Geelong's season for a New Year's resolution is something like, prove the competition wrong and make finals again. That's definitely a valid one. They're a very successful side, the Cats, and they rarely miss finals, but for them to do that, I think they've just not only, of course they do want to bounce back, but if they do want to do that, they've just got to really improve their midfield and defence. It was a letdown last year for the Cats and was a reason on why they dropped games. And yes, it was because of injuries, but even when pretty much all of the premiership back six was in the team for Geelong, they still looked defensively quite poor. And their midfield, they did, of course, lack Cameron Guthrie and a bit of Blitzarves, but it still was quite disappointing. And they do have a few young players running through there. We did witness quite a bit of that in 2023. And that leads me on to a player-based resolution, is just to get more exposure into that youth. They've got to get games in the 𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻 which they have heavily rate. And, Ted Closey also, and Max Holmes definitely does have to improve as well. And Tanner Bruin is one that just needs to get more game time, I think, for the Cats as well. So there's a few names in that midfield definitely to think about for the Cats. But yeah, they're just, I don't know what they're going to be like in 5 years' time, Geelong, because I still am a bit unknown about their youth. So exposure into that young crop, because Cats fans do really rate them. So I think that's going to be important for the Cats next year. So bouncing back, more consistency defensively and especially in the midfield, and more exposure in the youth. For the Gold Coast Suns now, and it's a pretty obvious one, but make finals. Pretty simple one. Damien Hardwick, new coach, really rates the list. They have got to really shake the competition and make the 8 next year. If I'm brutally honest, I don't know if us fans can be pessimistic heading into next year for the Suns. We can't just say, it might take a year or two and then they make the push. They've got to make the push now, especially under Damien Hardwick. Look what the coaching tree of Hardwick's been able to do. Adam Kingsley make the prelim final, first year for the Giants. Craig McRae, look what he was able to do, make a prelim final. First year for the Pies. And look, talent-wise and finals exposure-wise, it isn't as good as a squad as Gold Coast, but Hardwick really rates this team. And they've got a great midfield, they've got some underrated defenders, and especially they have some exciting players forward of centre, which leads me on to my player-based resolution. Jed Walter and King to just dominate as a duo. I think this could be the thorn in a lot of teams' defences heading into 2024 if they are going to be a good side. Jed Walter, high draft pick from last year's draft now, and he's just a physical freak. He's really good in the air, and with Chol out the door now, Kaz Bolt another year older, it's got to be these two players they really rally around heading into 2024. King is given that freedom now, chance to own it, kick 55 plus goals this year. So Walter, King to just really dominate as that duo, become the dynamic duo, and I think it could be a big X factor point should the Suns succeed in 2024 and potentially make the finals. For the GWS Giants now, a pretty obvious one for their team-best resolution. It's got to be just a reset, refresh, go again and push towards a grand final berth. Yes, in retrospect, that looked like they did overachieve a little bit, but geez, they just played some awfully good footy. It was almost like it wasn't a fluke, because they just dominated a lot of teams and they brought it up to Collingwood, especially in that prelim final. For me, they're definitely good enough to push towards a grand final, so it's just got to bounce back and really try and replicate that, which could be the issue, really could be the issue, because it was an exhausting year last year. So yeah, that's an interesting one, I think, for the Giants, how they will bounce back and go again this year. And for a play-based resolution for the Giants, I like to look at Kieran Briggs and for him to have an all-Australian worthy season. He was huge in the second half of the year for the Giants' success, and he was just a bully in the air. He was very good in the ruck and just grabbing out of the ruck and booting it forward, and was also able to make an impact on the scoreboard. So if he's able to replicate his really good second half of the year, play in 2024 and have an all-Australian worthy season, I think he'll be key should the Giants be successful in 2024. For the Hawthorn Football Club now, a really exciting team to look at heading into this season. People have them for finals, people have them pushing up the ladder. That's all fair enough, but I think similar to Carlton, you just have to take a step back in terms of ladder positions and results. And just, I think for Hawthorn, especially the young team they have, the most important thing is just to closing that gap between the best and worst footy. That's just where I look at Hawthorn really right off the bat, because yes, with a young team, bad and good footy will come, inconsistency will come, but I think internally, especially from Sam Mitchell's perspective, they'll really want to try and close in that gap, because geez, interstate, they were awful last year. They started off the year quite poor, but then they were able to beat Collingwood, for example. So yeah, with the young team they have, that's definitely their goal. Try and narrow that gap and play a bit more consistent football. For a player-based resolution, I'm not really singling out a player. I mean, I could in a way, but I just look at their forward line with the players they possess, and it's just a chance for them to become a very efficient and potent forward line heading into 2024. If I were to single out a player, I mean, Mitch Lewis, if he's able to have a fully consistent year, that'll be awesome. But Hawthorn, I mean, it was evident why 𝐓𝐡𝐞 did leave. They did sort of lack that really good number 2 to Mitch Lewis. So is 𝐼𝐴 able to come in and really play that role quite well? And as well as that, they of course did get Jack Gunston back. They got Jack Ginnivan too. They've got Nick Watson, of course, in their draft as well. Can't forget about Luke Bruce. They've got some exciting names in there. So for a player-based perspective, if they're able to really work it well as a forward 6 and in that forward half, that's definitely going to help Hawthorn get a lot more results and improve in 2024. Next team up we have is the Melbourne Demons. For their team-based resolution, for me, it's just got to be getting back to the big dance. It's a very high demanding one, but Melbourne is under a lot of pressure this year. They have very high expectations, of course, but for me, I just look at them internally. I think internally they do know that they are still a quality side. They have a great midfield. They have a great defence. Forward line can be a little bit inconsistent, but I mean, they just threw away their chances last year. They really should have won both of their games in finals last year. So I think it's important just about success. That's what they need the most. And for them to get back to a grand final is definitely the most important thing on their minds, or as a bit of a total goal, I think, for the Ds. And for a play-based resolution, it's just to get their forward structure right. How will they line things up? Will they have Van Rooyen as the solo tall and Fritsch as the second man up? Or will they want to try and get Harry Petty forward? He was very good last year. They've got to get that right, because that was too inconsistent last year. For a middle chunk of the year, it looked good and then looked bad. And then when the finals came, it just looked terrible again. They lacked composure, they lacked efficiency. It's similar to Hawthorn, just become an efficient and potent forward line in a way, because they've got the talent there. They've recruited for Carlton 𝐼𝐴, of course, as well, and Shane McAdam in the off-season through the draft and trade. So will they be able to add to the mix? But it's just really their sole issue, Melbourne, when looking at on the field. Getting that forward structure right is important for Melbourne heading into 2024. Moving on now to the North Melbourne Kangaroos. For their team-based resolution, a pretty obvious one is something like get out of the bottom 2, get out of the bottom 4, get some more wins. Yes, that's all valid. But again, I like to take a step back and just, when I look at North Melbourne, where their issues was last year was a lack of winning culture. And I think heading into 2024, if 𝐼𝐴 is able to fully coach the side this year with some exciting young players, they've got to start building that winning culture, improving that leadership, because that's what really cost them games last year. They were in the balance last year with a lot of games, and they could have won a few, but just how they dropped off and lost games was disappointing. So building that winning culture, improving the leadership, improving the senior players side of things, because they were disappointing last year too. That's, I think, the most important thing for North Melbourne to build in 2024. For a play-based resolution, I just look at Luke Davies-Uniacke. He's a player that is definitely the most hyped up, or one of the most hyped up players currently in pre-season, but he's turning 25 this year. He's not really as young anymore. He's got to have a full year of solid footy, in my opinion, because there's a bit of pressure now. It's just every year he looks good for half a year. He starts the year like a house on fire. Then he has an injury problem. And then when he is out on the puck, he just doesn't look like 100%. He doesn't look like his complete self. So Luke Davies-Uniacke is definitely a player I want to shine the spotlight on, for him to have a full year of solid footy, because it will just benefit North Melbourne so much if he's able to have a really consistent season. Next team up we have is the Port Adelaide Power. I've got a pretty high expectation resolution here, but for me, it just makes sense. They've got to get a home prelim. They've got to make a grand final, and for me, the only way for them to make the grand final, really realistically, is they've just got to make top 4 again and book in a home prelim final. It's a very optimistic team-based resolution, but they certainly have the talent to do it. They're a very good side at home, and they have some star quality forward to centre and in that midfield to really get themselves into that position. But where they were not so great last year was defensively, and that moves me on to my play-based resolution on getting the defensive structure right. It's an absolute must if Port Adelaide want to succeed in 2024, because they conceded the most points out of any club in the top 8 last year. 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼, geez, I feel sorry for him, was just under heavy duress almost every game, really. Tom Cleary was out injured. Tom Jonas is now retired and done. So now you look at the recruitments they have brought in, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼. If 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼 is able to come in and become that really good 1-2 punch alongside 𝐼𝐵𝐿𝐼 in defence, that'll really heavily improve things. If 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is able to play that third tall really nicely, that will definitely benefit Port Adelaide, because when he did play as a third tall for Essendon, I felt he was quite good, so he could really benefit Port Adelaide's side. If Brisbane can really continue to impress as well in their back line, just getting that structure right, they really need to improve defensively if they do want to succeed in 2024, Port Adelaide. For the Richmond Tigers now, for their team-based resolution, I have them to just play the youth. It's an obvious one, but I've also included for them to prove the comp wrong, because I still think they're a chance to push into the 8, and again, very optimistic, but they just have a few of those X-Factor players that can really win games off their own boots, like Dusty Martin, Shea Bolton, Taranto, etc. But the most important thing, really, as a whole team, is to play the youth, especially under the first-year coach of 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼. Really develop the likes of Thompson Dow, and get definitely 𝐓𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼 back on the side, playing first-team football, and also 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼 as well. A few of those younger players really need to start seeing first-team football, because it's something that they do lack a bit of exposure in that young crop. And as for a player-based perspective, I look at their midfield. They've got to get that midfield mix right. Will Shea Bolton play more midfield in 2024? It will certainly help fantasy and Supercoach numbers. You beauty. I will shut up now. That is irrelevant for this video. But yeah, just the midfield mix. Definitely really need to get that right under 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼. And we'll also some younger players in there get a bit more time, like 𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼 and Thompson Dow, etc. So yeah, midfield, they've got to get it right, and definitely improve in that area too, especially Taranto and Hopper. I think Hopper's definitely got to improve as well in 2024, get to his best. Next team up we have is the Saints. Very impressive team last year. They were in the 8 for every single round of 2023 and deservedly made the finals. But we all knew that it was inevitable. We just knew that the Saints weren't going to do much damage, because they just weren't a very potent forward line. They weren't a very damaging team. They were the lowest scoring side in the top 8 last year. So I think right off the bat, they do want to win a final. But if they want to do that, they obviously want to maintain their very strong defensive figure and improve the consistency in the midfield. That's another area where I look at the Saints especially as well. But yeah, just to become a high scoring side, that's definitely, I think, a goal for St Kilda in 2024. Get the most out of a player, especially of Max King. That's my player base resolution. Him to have an all-Australian worthy season. You could set a goal target for him, like 55, 60 plus goals. That's fair enough. But I've put down an all-Australian worthy season because if you want to make the all-Australian, you have to be good for pretty much every single game, which King has been unable to do now for a few seasons with injury and consistency issues. But when he is out in the park, he makes an impact for the Saints. So I think he's the key figure, I think, of the Saints to really improve their scoring ability. That obviously does put the onus on Mitch Owens to continue the output. Will Cooper Sharman or Tim Memory add some impact in there as well? 𝐓𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐿𝐼 as well, the young gun, and especially Higgins and Butler need to be more consistent too. So yeah, high scoring side, that's definitely an area for the Saints to really improve heading into 2024 and to try and win a final, because I think they're capable of definitely doing that. Moving on now to the Sydney Swans. For their team-based resolution, I have them to become a physically and mentally sharper side. Pretty interesting one. The reason why I say that is because last year they were the complete opposite of that. They finished games off so poorly, which was a lack of mental toughness, and they just weren't fit enough. And that probably flows back to their 2022 campaign of, the poor grand final and the delayed pre-season, and the lack of experience as well on that young crop made them struggle a bit. It was a really, really difficult year for Sydney. So for them just to become a more physically and sharper side with experience brought in and really improve that fitness, I think that's just a necessity for the Swans. Because again, the results will come. I think the most important thing is if they're able to become a fitter team and become a more mentally tougher side and just to really finish games off well, they should be a great chance to push towards the top 4. But where they've really benefited off, which was an issue last year, was a lack of experience. And moving on now to a play-based resolution, I'm looking at Taylor Adams and Brodie Grundy to make a huge impact for the Swans in 2024. They're going to be key, I think, if the Swans do want to succeed. For Grundy, well, the Swans haven't had an elite ruckman in a very long time. They haven't had that ruckman that's able to really dominate and really have some great games. So if Grundy's able to bring his best, really bring his ability to win it out of the middle and play as that extra midfielder, gain some headouts to advantage, which will really heavily improve the Swans' inconsistent midfield, he will be a great recruit, and he's needing to have a big season, I think, for Sydney. And moving on to Taylor Adams, the reason why I've also chosen him is because the Swans always struggle with their ability to get first possession in that midfield, and this is what Adams was able to do really well at Collingwood. I always thought he was a very underrated player for the Pies, so it's again a great pickup for Sydney. Callum Mills is out for the first few weeks of the season, so I think for him to really come in from round 0, because they do have the opening round game, not round 1, round 0, for him to really make an impact in that midfield is an absolute necessity for the Swannies if they do want to succeed. So yeah, to become a more physically and mentally sharper side, finish games off well, improve the fitness, and Adams and Grundy to make a huge impact is some pretty justified resolutions for the Swannies for 2024. Now for the West Coast Eagles, what's on the cards for them in 2024? Are they able to improve? Will they get out of the bottom 2? I'm keen to see how they will go, because they still have players, if they are able to recover from injuries, with a few of those experienced players like 𝐼𝐿𝐼𝐿𝐿 and 𝐼𝐶𝐰 and Jeremy McGovern. They could get a few more wins next year, but for their play or team-based resolution, I have them just to, as a whole, to just get fitter. They really need to be a fitter side, because if you're not a fit enough side, obviously that will lead to injuries. It was definitely also heavily brought up from the media that they just didn't look fit enough, and they had staff issues and personnel issues with their inability to be a fit enough side. So for them just to be a more fitter team will definitely improve their upside for 2024, and to also grow the youth. This is just an absolute must for West Coast, and it moves me on to my player-based resolution. Just let the kids play, let them loose in the middle. The big 3 is Ruben Yimby, Elijah Hewett, and of course the main man of Harley Reid. Also Clay Hall in a way, I guess you can also add in too. But just to see what will they offer. I can't really single one of them out because they're just all quality plays. Will Harley Reid play more of the more forward of centre? That could be also on the cards. But Yimby, if he's able to have a more... I think the most important thing is just to get consistent game time in the likes of Yimby and Hewett and a few of those younger players, because they were a little bit managed last year, and that could be the same in heading into this year. But the most important thing is to get fitter and just to grow the young players and get exposure into them heading to 2024. And for the final team now in this video today, the Western Bulldogs, for a team-based resolution. It's a pretty simple one. I just always look at the Doggies as an inconsistent side. So for me, it's just to display more consistent football. It's an absolute must if the Doggies do want to make finals. The issues that were quite apparent last year for the Bulldogs was that gap between their best and worst plays. They had a lot of plays that just didn't look like up to AFL standard, whilst you had an absolute superstar like Bontempelli and their good quality midfield really carrying the team on their back, and a very exciting forward line too. They have the absolute stars in there, but they've just got to really closing that gap between their best and worst plays and their best and worst footy if they do want to make a charge towards finals, because they certainly have the talent to do that. Moving on now to the play-based resolution. Good looking midfield, very good looking forward line. The defence though is still a bit of an issue. Very poor defending transition. That was again the same thing in 2023. Comparing to 2022. So for them to possess a stronger defensive profile is an absolute must. They didn't really do much in the offseason apart from bringing in Caulfield, who had a very good 2020 as that intercepting defender for the Saints. So what can he provide for the Bulldogs? They're going to need another really good year off Liam Jones, you do think. Will a player like Sam Darcy able to take a key defensive post and have a really good breakout year? He could be on the cards too. How will the running half-backs go? Will Bailey Dale have more consistent footy? Will Ed Richards really improve? I think he could have a really good breakout season next year. But just I like to look at the Bulldogs as a collective group defensively for a play-based resolution. As a defensive group, they really have to be a more stronger side and a more accountable team on the defensive transition for 2024 if they do want to improve. So everyone, there is every AFL club's New Year's resolutions for 2024. We've been recording for an absolute while, but you know how it is on the channel. I do truly like to sit down and have a good old chat about the footy. So that's my thoughts on every AFL club heading into 2024, everyone, in terms of goals. Feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what you did think of my thoughts, and if you are a particular fan of a club, let me know your thoughts about your team heading into 2024. Once again, everyone, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did go on to enjoy, and until next time, I will talk to you later. See you later, fellas.